In this video for Computer Science 9618 AS level, we're going to take a look at problem solving practice, which will show up on paper 2, and this is set number 1 of those problem solving practice. Now, the only way to get good at problem solving is to practice it. It is a skill that must be sharpened to be a successful programmer. You're not going to wake up one day and magically be able to problem solve. It takes practice and some more practice, and you definitely want to sharpen that skill, and you definitely can. So let's take a look at a couple paper 2 problems which require problem solving so we know what they look like, and then we're going to be coding them out step by step. So let's go ahead and take a look at our first practice problem here. And our first one says a string conversion function, xcaml, needs to be written. This function forms a return string, outstring, from a given string, instring by doing the following. 1. Separating the original words. A word is assumed to start with a capital letter, converting all characters to lowercase. The following shows a pair of example values for the string values instring and outstring. So if we have the instring my user input, it converts it all to lowercase, and it separates each word by a space. You may assume that instring always starts with a capital letter. So let's swing over to VB. Let's program this xcaml function with a parameter instring, return an outstring that separates all the words. Let's go ahead and swing over and do that now. All right, we're in VB. We're going to code out that function. I have 2 variables, start string. This is a walkthrough of a Cambridge question. So the expected result is to have each of those words separated by a space, of course, and to have it all lowercase, and then the final string is going to hold the value of that function. So the function they wanted us to have is called xcaml, so we're going to do that. And what we're going to do here is we're going to do by val, and we're going to do instring, because that's what they wanted us to use. And of course, we'll be returning a string value. That's what the as string on the outside does. So I'm going to have my outstring. That's what they wanted the return value to be, and I'm going to need a letter as a character because I need to separate each letter. I need to check if it's uppercase or to see if it is lowercase. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a for loop because I want to traverse through each letter of the string, the in string or start string. And because I'm doing that, I'm going to use mid. So because I'm using mid, I'm going to start at 1. And I need to go to the in string, the length of that. So that's going to set up my for loop. What I need to do now is I need to isolate each letter. I'm going to store that in letter. Then we're going to check to see if it's uppercase or lowercase. So I'm going to use mid. I am working with in string. I want to start at position I, because it's going to start at the first letter, then the second all the way through, and I want to take 1 character. Now all I need to do is select case letter, and then I can do case A to capital Z. So this will check to see if it's an uppercase letter. If it is, I need to make it lowercase. So I'm going to update my letter to L case, which says, okay, I want to make something lowercase. What do I want to make lowercase? I want to make letter lowercase. When I have an uppercase letter, I know it's time for a new word, so I need to put a space in between that. So I'm going to update my outstring to be a space followed by the new letter. So that is one possibility. Another possibility is A to a lowercase z. And then if that's the case, all I'm going to do is update outstring with that letter because it's already lowercase. After my loop, I'm going to return my outstring. I'm going to go back up to my submain. So a very short function here, not a lot going on. We're just checking to see if it's uppercase or lowercase. Our for loop to isolate each letter. And then here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to say final string equals, and I'm going to call xcaml. I'm going to pass down start string. And then what I can do is I can output final string to make sure that it works here. So we're going to run it, and we should see this is a walkthrough of a Cambridge question. Again, we call our function here in a very short function. We isolate each character one at a time. That's what this does inside of our for loop. We check to see if it's uppercase. If it is uppercase, we're going to make it lowercase. After we make it lowercase, we're simply going to concatenate that onto our existing outer or our out string. And then if it's lowercase, we're going to tack that onto the existing out string to get our final output. Let's take a look at the next problem solving question to take a look at. All right, so in exercise 2, a multi-user computer system makes use of passwords. To be valid, a password must comply with the following rules. At least 2 lowercase alphabetic characters, at least 2 uppercase alphabetic characters, at least 3 numeric characters, and alphanumeric characters only. A function validate password is needed to check that a given password follows these rules. This function takes a string pass as a parameter and returns a Boolean value. True if pass contains a valid password, false otherwise. Write program code to implement the new function validate password. So let's swing over and let's practice more problem solving by coding this out step by step. All right, exercise 2, I have set up the function validate password. The only reason I did that is so I could type in the requirements to remember what they were. So we need at least 2 lowercase letters, 2 uppercase letters, 3 numbers, only alphanumeric letters, which means no symbols. Now, Cambridge does expect you to understand how the ASCII code value system works, which is how this system is actually going to work. They do mention that in part 1 of the syllabus. They say that you don't have to memorize the ASCII code chart, but they do expect you to understand how it works. And that's what we'll be using with our case statements today. Just like we did in the last problem, we did capital A to capital Z. We can look at the ASCII code chart and see why that works, because capital A is at 65, capital Z is 26 letters later, whatever that may be. I know lowercase a starts at 97, all the way to lowercase z, wherever that is, but it does go in order. Anyway, we have 3 passwords here. UPA456 lowercase cs, that should return true. When we pass the second password, that should return false. It meets all the requirements except for 2 lowercase letters. We'll only have 1. The third password meets the requirements except for the exclamation mark at the end, which is not an alphanumeric character. We're going to need some values in our variables in our validate password function. We accepted pass as the parameter because that's what it told us, and we're going to be returning a Boolean value, which is either going to be true or false. And we're not going to store that in a variable. We're simply going to return true or false. I need a lowercase count. I'm going to do that as an integer. I need an uppercase count. That's going to be an integer. And then I need a number count. I don't need to count how many symbols there are. As soon as I encounter a symbol, I'm going to exit the function by returning false right then and there. There's no point to even need to check the rest of the password. Once we encounter a symbol, we know it's not valid. We don't need to go through the rest of it, traverse the rest of it. So all we need to do is simply return false. So the last thing I need is a letter. And I'm going to do that as a char. So I'm going to do for I equals 1, 2, and that is going to be pass.length. Very similar to the last one here, very similar. And I'm going to do letter equals. I'm going to use mid again. I'm working with pass. I want letter I, and I want one of those letters to hold on to. Now I'm going to do select case letter again. So I'm going to do select case letter. And then I'm going to check to see if it's A. Let me put this back here. I'm going to check to see if it's a capital A to a capital Z. If it is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to increment my uppercase count. So I'm going to do uppercase count plus equals 1. I'm going to check the lowercase. So to lowercase z. If that is the case, I'm going to do lowercase count plus equals 1. Now the last thing I'm going to do is case else, because if it's not oh, no, I'm not. I need to check the numbers. Now you may be saying, well, hold on, numbers are integers. Yes, but they're inside of a string, so we can use string manipulation on that. We'll do 0 to 9. If it's one of those, then I'm going to do my number count plus equals 1. And then the last one is case else. If it's not a uppercase letter, if it's not a lowercase letter, if it's not a number, then it has to be a some type of symbol. I'm just going to return false. That's all I'm going to do. Now, outside my for loop, I've gone through, I need to check to see if the uppercase count, lowercase count, and number count, if they all meet what they're supposed to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do if number, or let's start with the first one. Let's do uppercase count. So if my uppercase count is greater than or equal to 3, then we're good to go. So we can actually say not equal, less than. If it's less than 3, then we're going to return false. All right, we don't need to have a some type of ugly if statement where we have nothing in the if statement and then else return false. We're not going to do that. If it's less than 3, we know we haven't gotten it because it says at least 2 uppercase letters. So if it's less than 2, actually, not less than 3, because we only need 2 uppercase letters. So then if lowercase count is less than 2, then we're going to return false. And we need to run all of these. We need to check all of these. Actually, you know what? We can use else if. We're going to use else if. We don't need to, because then we can just have one else return true. Because if one of these is not the case, then it's obviously going to return false. The last thing we need to check is if the numbers, my number count, if that is less than 3, then we're going to return false. And then we have an else statement and we return true. That is outside my loop. So let's go ahead and save that. Now what we need to do is we need to go back to our sub main. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to print this. So we're going to do console.writeLine. I'm going to call my validate password. And what I'm going to pass is password 1. Then I'm just going to copy and paste this. And we should see true, true, false. Or true, false, false. So that's what we should see here. So password 3. So let's take a look at our function one more time. So we have lowercase count as an integer, uppercase count as integer, number count as integer. So we isolated each character. That's what we did with our for loop. Our for loop starts at 1 because we're using mid. Working with our parameter pass, we're starting at character I, which is going to traverse each character, and we want to keep one of them. We check to see if it's capital A to capital Z. If it is, we increment the uppercase count by 1. If it's lowercase, we increment the lowercase count. If it's a number, we increment the number count. If it's anything else, we return false. So that looks pretty good. The uppercase count, if it's less than 2, because we only need 2. If it's not less than 2, then we'll keep going. If any one of these parameters is not met, the password is invalid. So that's why we have those as else if statements. Once we hit a return statement in a function, it exits the function. It doesn't continue running the function. So if you're wondering, okay, how is this going to work? As soon as it hits return false, like if we have an exclamation mark or a symbol at the very beginning of the password, it's going to exit right then and there because it's not a uppercase letter, it's not a lowercase letter, it's not a number. So I feel pretty confident about it. So let's go ahead, let's run this, and we should see true, false, false. And we do true, false, false. So that is how exercise 2 works. Hope you guys found this video on problem solving helpful. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to help the channel grow, and be on the lookout for more problem solving practice videos. We'll see you guys in the next one.